tonight and coming out to Ziggy's Bookshop. We're very excited to have you, and we are also very excited to have Bridey Thelen-Heidel here tonight. Celebrating her new book, Bright Eyes, and she's going to be in conversation tonight with Elliott as well. So I'll do a quick intro, but overall for tonight, it'll be about a 30-minute conversation between the two of them. We'll open it up to a Q&A, and then we have plenty of books to buy. We'll keep you guys perched up right here to sign. But yeah, so a quick bio for both of them. So Bridey's chaotic upbringing meant changing schools between Alaska and California more than 20 times. A Lewis and Clark College graduate, she lives in South Lake Tahoe with her husband and daughter and teaches English literature at her alma mater. A TEDx speaker and frequent podcast guest, Bridey performed in Listen to Your Mother NYC and is published at Move Magazine and the 2023 San Francisco Writers Foundation anthology. Bridey has been voted Best of Tahoe Teacher several times, and her work with LGBTQ plus students is celebrated in Read This, Save Lives, and the California Teachers Association, California Educator, to name a few things. It's okay. And Elliott is an advertising copywriter with a degree in English from UCLA. Her writing has been featured in Literary Hub magazine, Ziggy Owens' magazine, so that's fitting, and Authority magazine. Her debut novel, There Are No Rules for This, won 2 Ziggy Awards, Best Book for Best Friends and Best Book That Made You Cry. It was a runner-up for Best Book That Made You Laugh as well. It was also a finalist in Best New Fiction in the International Books Award. A native of Northern California, JJ now lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her husband, 2 teenage kids, and 2 poorly trained bulldogs. She loves to read, my personal favorite, drink wine, play tennis, and eat cheese, and There Are No Rules for This is her first novel. So enjoy.
Thank you, guys. Are we is it like projecting?
It's not projecting.
Oh, it's just capturing for that. Okay. You guys can all hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm so excited and honored to be here with Bridey. I don't know if you guys know about you all know how fabulous she is. This book is #1 new release in educator biographies on Amazon. It has a 5.0 review on Amazon and 4.8 on Goodreads, and Goodreads is the mean one. So that's like amazing. And it's an incredible book if you haven't read it. If you have, you know what I'm talking about. And I would love to start us out with you reading from your book.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to just take mine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming. I've taught a lot of you. It's like really touching. You don't have to read the book, by the way. You can just skip to the back, to the last chapter. Okay. This is from chapter 1, yes, and this kind of sets up the scenario for what's to come in my life with my mom and my little sister. And so chapter 1 gives you a good idea of what we've been through and unfortunately where we're headed. So it's called Yes. Lake Tahoe, 1982. Bridey, come now, I need you. Mom screams on the other end of the phone. Mom, what's wrong? Where are you? Panicking because I haven't seen her since last night when she went out with her girlfriends. I look out the living room window like she might be calling hard. I'm at Debbie's, she says, choking on each word. I'm coming. Slamming the phone on the receiver, I drop my Barbie on the oil stains Al's Harley Davidson dripped on the carpet the last time he rode it out of our living room. I leap off the porch and land on prickly pine cone pieces. Ouch, I shout, hopscotching across the dirt driveway and pulling stabby bits out of the bottoms of my feet that don't have their summer calluses yet because school's only been out a week. Sprinting to Debbie's house around the corner, I slip by the neighbor's wood fence where my initials BT are carved under the initials BM. The boy who scratched them into the wood acted like he didn't know how to play doctor the first time I showed him. After the second time, he carved our initials together. I pushed Debbie's front door open without knocking and see my mom slumped over the kitchen table, still wearing the burgundy blouse I picked for her to wear out. Crouching down on the gold-speckled linoleum next to her chair, I smooth her blonde curls away from her face. Hey, Mom. Her pink, puffy eyes stare into mine, like she's trying to remember who I am. Hey, baby, she whispers, snot dripping onto her jeans. Hi, I whisper back, forcing myself to smile. I'm here, Mom. It's okay now. A big, deep breath sits her up straight, and she wipes her nose with the back of her hand. Tears stream down her cheeks as she shakes her head back and forth. Oh no, baby, it's not okay. She pulls me to her chest and sobs almost harder than I've ever heard her. Smothered in her taboo perfume, which I usually love, my nose burns because it's soured overnight. But I'd never ever pull away. Mom, did someone die? She searches my face for her answer, then looks over her shoulder to make sure we're alone. Coming in so close, her face is blurry. She whispers, I'm pregnant. What? I shake my head, not thinking I heard her right. She coughs like she's unsticking the answer in her throat. It's Al's. His name knocks me on my butt. I shove it back at her with both hands, scooting myself across the cold linoleum. No, 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 no. Mom reaches for me. I know, baby, I'm sorry. My back against the kitchen wall, I bury my head between my knees and try breathing, wheezing and gasping for air the way I did when Al lived with us. I close my eyes, but he's there. Black eyes, black hair, black boots, waiting in the dark like always. My eyes snap open to get away, but then she's there. Teary eyes, sad face, hand outstretched, hoping I'll come to her like always. With no way to get away from either of them, I wrap my arms around my knees and cry out to her. Why'd you do this? It was so hard to get him to leave. Come to your mama, she says, in the hushed voice she started using when Al moved in. My head shakes no, but my body can't help but go to her because she's all I have. I climb into her lap to let her hold me the way I've held her 1,000 times. Wiggling into position, we both giggle because draped across her lap, my legs dangle over the side as my bare toes sweep back and forth over the cold linoleum. Mom? What, baby? Please don't let him come back. He won't. She exhales what sounds like all her breath her body can hold and pulls me back on her chest, wrapping her arms around me and sniffling back tears I know she's afraid to cry because she might never stop. I stare up at Debbie's ceiling, someone covered with popcorn kernels painted white. Counting the kernels feels as impossible as counting the freckles on my arms. It reminds me that even though Mom said Al is Black Irish, whatever that means, he's not Irish like me and doesn't have freckles. So the baby probably won't. We won't match at all. The sun's gone from Debbie's kitchen and goosebumps replace my freckles. Hey, Mom, you want to go home? She wipes her nose on the back of my t-shirt, already soaked in her tears and sticking to my skin, then begins moaning the way I do when my stomach hurts. Her arms squeeze tighter around me as she rocks us in the heavy wooden chair. Her warm breath on my neck drops my eyelids close and I lose myself in the rhythm of the rocking. The two of us bobbing up and over waves that grow bigger as she moans loud. Floating in our ocean, Mom's hands slide down my sides and grip my t-shirt like she's holding on to a life jacket instead of wearing it. I'm saving her from drowning. Again. Sometime later, I open my eyes and the kitchen is almost dark. I move on her lap to loosen her grip and wake her from wherever she drifted off to. Under me, she whispers, So do you want to keep this baby? Keep the baby? I repeat her question to myself because I don't know what she means. Before I can ask what not keeping a baby means, my mom slides me off her lap and into the chair next to me. Sitting knee to knee, she mittens her hands with her sleeves and wipes her eyes and nose. Her pout bends up into a smile. I have an idea. Copying her, I gulp some air and dry my eyes with my t-shirt. What is it? You can be the baby's dad, Mom says, patting my thighs and smiling. Then she crinkles up her nose like she ate something gross. We don't need Al. I'll even put your name on the baby's birth certificate. Huh? I ask because her solution is even more confusing than the problem. What do you mean I can be the dad? She points to herself. You know, I'm the mom. Then she points to me. And you're the dad. We'll raise the baby on our own. Her puffy brown eyes are begging me to understand, and I really want to. But this look that's happy and sad and scared and excited all at once is one I've seen too many times since Al moved in. Her confusion about him never made sense because I knew the first time we met, Al was a monster. And now she wants to have the monster's baby. No, Al? Won't he care? Mom holds my hands in hers and touches her forehead to mine. I'm not going to tell him I'm pregnant. What? I quickly pull away from her and tug at the neck of my t-shirt, now soaked in tears and snot. She leans back and smooths her blouse and hair like she's finally ready to leave Debbie's kitchen. We'll go back to Juneau and keep the baby a secret from him. Forever? She nods. If he never knows there's a baby, he'll never come looking for us. But how can I be a dad? I'm not a boy. Snot drips on my lip and I wipe it off my forearm, smearing the slippery slime across my freckles. And I'm only 10. Mom laughs. I know you're 10, Bright Eyes, but we can do this. She stands up. Are you ready? I stare up at my mom, wishing I believed he wouldn't come back. But she always lets him back because she can't be alone, and I don't count. I'm also not allowed to say no to her, ever. So I answer the only way I can. Yes.
So before I start asking questions, I wanted you to know that, so we've met and we've hung out and we've chatted a bunch of times. But after reading your book, I know that we have even more in common. Number one, we both had to forgive our mothers, which it's for different reasons, but it's not easy to do. Number two, we both were randomly gifted ponies that we didn't want. I got one for my 9th birthday. And then I was like berated by my parents for why I wasn't going to like shovel his shit. And I'm like, I didn't want the pony. And then number 3, we both like to drink wine in bathtubs.
Yes.
So anyway, just knowing, just setting that scene.
Yes.
Okay. But my first question for you is, did you always know that you were going to write about this? Did you always know this book was inside you?
Yes, for sure. I think like a lot of people who grow up in a lot of kids who grow up in tough situations, we have diaries, right? We have little velvet diaries that have a lock with a key that you lose, and then you have to break the lock, right? Yeah. And then those diaries become journals when you're in college, and you write sad poems that you read, unfortunately, out loud at your open mic. But I think that's how I made sense of the world, was writing it down. And I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. And so I think that writing it down for me was, I was telling the story to myself and making sense of it. But there did come a time where it felt like I wanted to talk about it. And that didn't come for a long time. So I think I always thought there might be a book. I definitely, as probably a lot of you do when you have wacky things that happen and you tell people, they're like, you should write a book, right? How many of you have heard, you should write a book? Yeah, thank you. Okay. And I did. So I did. But I feel like there's a story here, and I feel like a lot of us have stories, and I just happened to one day decide it was time for it all to come out, because it was actually making me really sick. So I think that's where the book came. I didn't really realize that I was going to write a book that people were going to read. I was writing a book for myself. I was writing a book for my family to read. I was writing a book for my sisters to read, because they don't know the stories or why I left them and never came back. And so I do hope they read this book and they'll know how hard I tried to stay. So.
And when was it that you said yes to yourself to write this book? Like, how many years ago was that, or when was that in your life that you were?
Well, the book is divided into a no and a yes section, right? And I said yes to my mom my whole life, and then I finally said no to her and was able to say yes to myself. And that no really came with having my daughter, Hannah. I tried to say no for myself, but it was really when I saw the impact of my mom on what might be the impact she would have on my daughter. And so that, I think that kind of mama thing came out, and I was like, man, you've done this dream for a long time. I'm going to say no now and say yes to myself and yes to my family. And then the book started 5 years ago, almost to this week, actually, of it being published. So
you must have written it pretty fast, because it takes a while to get it actually through the publishing funnel.
Yes.
Wow,
yeah.
impressive.
It
was in there.
People who know me know that, like, I sit down and I do something and I just do it. And so it was like 10-hour days for about 3 hours or 3 years. And then we had a pandemic, which I was just at home like, I'm gonna write a book, right? And I'm an English teacher, so I teach high school English, and Shakespeare wrote a lot of plays during the lockdown of the theaters. So
I love that.
I was like, well, okay, let's write a book. Yeah.
So something else that I think is so brilliant that you do in this book that's not easy to do is that you keep this in the perspective of the age that you're at when it's happening in the memoir.
Yeah.
And it changes because you grow throughout that. So how did you access that? How did you like get yourself back to those spaces? That had to, it's almost like acting or something,
Right.
you know?
The book, it's written in present tense. And that is just the way these scenes started coming out. And I have read, obviously, like a lot of memoir, and I love it. Memoir is beautiful and awesome because you can go back and have this really great reflective voice, this wisdom that you didn't have when you're going through it. I felt like not only were the stories coming out of me in present tense, but I also wondered what it would be like as a reader to read it and experience it with me. So you already know I'm okay because I wrote a book, right? And if you flip to the last couple of pages, you'll know I'm really okay. But I just thought, well, what would it be like for a reader to be as unsure of what's coming next, right? What would it be like for a reader to know, like dramatic irony, again, English teacher, right? To know what's around the corner and wonder what's around the corner because you're older and you know that something's around the corner, but I don't because I'm 7 or 8 or 9. And I don't know that that person is as bad as you probably suspect, right? And so I just thought it would be an interesting experiment to see what it would be like to stay in that voice. It was very humbling though, for sure, because you want to be smarter and you want to be wiser and you want to have the big words and you want to be like, I knew it, but I didn't. And I didn't know what the drugs were. I knew what they did to the adults, but I didn't know what they were called. And I didn't know a lot of things. And I think the challenge was using the vocabulary of my age and really a lot of like meditation to stay in that scene and to go back and go, oh, that doesn't sound like when I was 9. But I think if you really go into those moments and you've done that, right? Memories are in present tense. So if you're in a memory, you're back there, aren't you? Hence trauma triggers and all that stuff. So if you're in a memory, you're there and you feel it and you see it. You know, if you hear that song on the radio, you're in present tense. And so that is what my challenge was to stay in that present tense. So I played a lot of songs and taught myself a lot. And I have a couple writing groups. And, you know, the second that it started to pull me out, I stopped and I'd go back and take out those words and realize that I didn't talk like that. I was a pretty sassy, wise 9-year-old, you know, but I knew bad words. I didn't know big words. They were very short.
Did it give you more compassion for yourself back then though? Like, I mean, because you're looking at your young self as an adult.
Yeah.
But you're also having to remember what it was like for your young self at that moment.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
how did it heal you? Did it hurt you?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe all of it.
Yeah, I think if you go back into your own stories in your own life, you have to relive it a bit. And that can be really hard. It's very cathartic. Actually, I did a TED talk about the trauma triggers coming up. And I call it like an exorcism because they really do. They have to come up and they're going to come out anyway, depending on how they show. But for me, I was calling them back up after I'd been hiding them very successfully for a long time. I think that if it's I was talking to my friend Randy, who's written an amazing memoir as well. But it's very cathartic to do this for yourself. It's very healing. As I was explaining to somebody a little while ago who's writing, you know, if you have something that's been really hard for you to go through, you're hanging on to it because you want to hold those people accountable. So you're going to hold those memories and hold those people accountable so that when you hear that song, you can hold that memory accountable, right? When you smell that perfume or that cologne, you can hold those people accountable. And so I think writing it down is very cathartic because it gets it out of your body and it's on paper or it's on a computer. And you do not have to work so hard to hang on to it and to remember every bit of it. And so once it was on my computer, I could hit delete. I could very dramatically print out those pages and burn them, which I did. You can, crumple them up. But I think that process is incredibly healing. And I would encourage anybody who has gone through rough stuff, the more you write it down, it becomes a story. And then also have some really lovely people whose laps you can crawl into, my husband and my daughter, because going back and being 8 or 9 years old, 10, 11, 12 years old, was hard. It was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very hard. And I actually quit drinking wine for a while because I was like, oh man, between crying and drinking wine, I'm never going to get the book finished.
I feel like that's how I got my book finished. Like crying. Yes, for the
It
difference.
works both ways. You can be Hemingway, you can be Steinbeck.
How has it felt? So as both a mother and a teacher, so you've got these young people in the world looking at you. How has it felt sharing your story?
Well, how many of you in the audience were in my class? Thank you.
Awesome.
Yay. Yeah. It's been very challenging to think about. I will tell you that I still teach high school English, and I teach 9th and 12th grade, and I just banned my school.
You can't ban books,
I
Bridey.
did. I'm sorry.
You can't.
Banned book week.
No.
I did it. I banned it.
Okay, you're in trouble.
I did. I banned it, please. I just told my 14-year-old students, please
That
don't
makes
read
them
it.
want to read it more.
I know.
Okay.
I know. It really did. Sales went up, for sure. It was not my plan, but it worked. But I think what is a little bit challenging is I've gotten some messages from these beautiful humans in this room who I've taught. And it is not easy to share these stories that are in this book. But I know it matters. And I know it's important. And I know that for people who need it, there's a healing in it. And there's something about just knowing that you're not alone. And that hopefully you've not gone through this, or maybe you've gone through worse, because, as I've been saying a little bit lately, like nobody wants to win the dysfunctional game, right? But it is extremely humbling and a little bit terrifying to get messages from my students. My first students are 40 years old right now. So that, of course, they're grown up enough to deal, but I have protected my reputation in my little town so closely. And I'm known for being like a host of community events, and I drove an ice cream truck and wore wigs and sequins. And so to come out and be like, let me tell you this story. It's a lot.
But maybe it also explains why you lean into joy and connection as much as you do. Truly, like, I mean, I think that people, that is why you are who you are in a lot of ways. Okay, how did you decide what scenes and memories you were going to share and what you weren't going to share?
The scenes and memories are these scenes and memories that just came out. There's very little that didn't make the final cut. I just knew as I was writing, this has to be the story. It has to be the story. This has to come out. These were certain ones. I had to tell about the pony I didn't want. I had to tell about the boyfriends of my mother's. I had to just get some stories out. There are certainly stories that I didn't write down, right? We all have tons of stories that you're never going to write down because for whatever reason. But I did feel like as you're writing something like this, there comes like an arc to the story, and you decide really what is the story you're going to tell, because a memoir is not, as our publisher Brooke Warner always says, it's not just a purging of every bad thing that's ever happened to you, right? You have to make a decision about what is the story that you want to tell. And I realized I wanted to tell the yes and no story. So I had to say yes, right? Chapter 1, I had to say yes. And then when and why did I start saying no? And how did that just change my entire life? And how was I able to do that? And so the stories came out because of that. But these are definitely the stories that were in my journals. These are the stories I was never supposed to tell. These are stories that no one in my family knows, including my mother. She will read these stories for the first time. and learn things that she's never known. I've never disclosed to her either. We are not in contact, by the way, but yeah, so it'll be a light bedtime read for her, won't it?
But you do say yes in the end, just not to her,
Right.
which is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love that so much.
Yeah.
You say yes to yourself and to Duran Duran.
And to Duran Duran.
Why would you
I
not
got a Durania.
say yes to Duran Duran?
Yes.
So, and I'm sure most people who know you know that you're in Tahoe and you're still there. So that's where a lot of your story takes place.
Yeah.
So, and I know you touch on this in the book, but like, how have you reclaimed it for your own?
That's been if you have experienced anything in a place and it triggers you, it's such an amazing thing to get to go back. So even if it's your high school, even if it's just a neighborhood you lived in or a home or something, Tahoe in this book is terrible. It's just terrible. And when I moved back there after college, I didn't want to stay. And it was a very weird kind of something that got me back to Tahoe. But then I met this extremely sweet, cute boy who's in the black shirt over there. And I stayed. And I think what's been an interesting and healing thing is that I've spent my life kind of becoming known for being a good person and helping my community, as opposed to growing up and being the other part of the community, being the scary neighbors that nobody wants to live next door to. Like we were that house that you did not want. You didn't want your kids to come over to my house. We had all the cars, the junky cars in the yard. And so I think what's really cool is last week I was the grand marshal of our homecoming parade in our little town. It was really cute. And at first I said no, because I'm like, that's awkward. It's like a book about trauma. And I'm like, hello. But then they made the whole homecoming theme books. And so then I had to. But it was really sweet because here I am going, I'm in this red convertible sitting there doing the princess wave, and I'm passing the motel that's in this book.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, how is this the same lifetime? Right? Yeah. How is that
one
the same
generation?
Lifetime? Yeah.
One generation. We talked about this on the phone about how in one generation you can heal trauma from all the generations before, yes. And I feel like we're doing that for our children, but it wasn't done for our mothers,
right? And
there's nothing we can do about that, right? But we can heal it moving forward,
right?
Yeah.
Very proud of that. There's multi generations, several generations in my family of abandoning your children, and no.
Yeah.
You're stuck with me, kid.
Mine are too.
I know. You're not getting rid of me.
Okay, and I think we can open it up for questions pretty soon. But the one thing I will say is, will you please help me meet John Bon Jovi? Because I've been obsessed with him since I was a teenager. I went on his cruise. I'm obsessed. So you need to help me meet John Bon Jovi, because after reading your story, I'm so inspired.
To Simon Le Bon from Duran Duran, by the way.
Her love from childhood that she meets and gets on stage with.
Yeah.
Okay, you just have to read the book. It's amazing.
So
anyway, she's gonna help me meet John Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
I think is it good timing? Yeah, for people if anyone has questions.
Yes, Mr. Neese.
2 questions.
Yes.
When you were recalling these stories, did you have conversations with your sisters or anyone else that's in the book to help to get their recall of it, or are these all your own?
So interestingly, my sisters who are in the book, there's 2 really little tiny girls in the book. So they have and I don't have any contact with them, so I couldn't call them. The little girl who this book is dedicated to, Bevins, she's 41 now. And her situation, she's pretty young in this book, but where I remembered everything, she remembered nothing from her childhood. So she read this book, and that filled in a lot of the memories that she had blocked out. So we had a very different experience. I actually really only consulted a hypnotherapist, to tell you the truth, because I didn't have anybody really to talk to. I'm not in contact with any of the people really in this book. And so other than a few family members who I kind of said, well, what are the dates of this? And some family friends, what are the dates of that? But really, I had to let go of the fact that when you write memoir, it's your story. You get to tell your story. And that story is not going to look like other people's stories. And so that part of it, I did have a hypnotherapist that there were a couple of scenes in here that I didn't even believe myself happened. I wasn't sure. And the hypnotherapist was able to validate that they did happen. And I trusted her as a professional to do that. But I do think that is a tricky thing about memoir, is you have to trust your memory. And it's your perspective, and it's not going to be the same as someone else's, for sure. Yeah.
The second question is, for those who might read the book who are going through something like you went through, what do you hope is their takeaway?
I was telling Randy, I'm doing some work with domestic violence shelters now and opening up to that side of my life a little bit, hoping to help the kids. I don't know about helping, the people who are being hurt, the adults, but I think I can give a kid's perspective about taking care and rescuing their moms and being that kind of role. But I hope somebody who's reading this now, and I do have a few people who are going no contact with their moms and they're reading it, I think to do it earlier than I did, and maybe to do it for yourself and not wait till you have a child or feel like you have to because you might not have a child, right? And you are the child. So do it for your own child. I would love that. I would love people reading it. Well, this is a little digression, but somebody came up to me not long ago. I gave a speech at a child abuse advocacy awards thing. And a man came up to me at the end of it and he said, I want you to know that I am the bad guy in your book. And he said, I've worked, for 20 years to be better, but I'm the guy who would have brought your parents the drugs. I am the guy who would have not cared that you didn't have food. And so I think that's interesting too, right? I would have never expected that to be the audience for this book. And he just apologized and said, I can't even imagine how many kids I affected with my actions that could write books. And I had something to do with that. So, I suppose maybe there's a perspective of an addict as well, somebody who's not paying attention to their child, and your kid might write a book.
Watch out. Do you feel like, sorry, I'm jumping on another question, but do you feel like as a teacher and, do you look for those kids?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And you find them, I'm sure.
Yeah. As a teacher, you have to. It's just your instinct, right? To look for those kids. You see them, they see you. I have several kids right now who they're like, I know. You just see it in their eyes. You see it in their eyes, or they will give you a little hint about what they couldn't do, why they couldn't do their homework, what was going on this weekend. And so I feel like I've been teaching 25 years, and I feel like for 25 years, I've just tried to tell them, I see you. You can rewrite your story. You do not have to live the story you've been written into.
That's right.
You get to make your own life. And as soon as you can kind of control your world, make good choices and surround yourself by good people. Don't do what's being done to you or what you're watching, right? Use it as kind of a way to go the other way too. Yeah. Love you.
Sorry, I interrupted the questions.
Yeah.
Is there other questions?
Yes.
In your process writing this, were there times that you really struggled with feeling like you lost some of the memories? I know you say you talked to a hypnotherapist, but how much of a battle was that for you trying to access places that you might have blocked off from the time that you were 10 or 12 years old?
Yeah, that was extremely hard, Bruce. That was pretty challenging. That was a lot of meditation too. a lot of writing. And as I was writing, more things would come out. Songs helped a lot. We know songs trigger, don't they? Songs take you back, as I was saying, like right to that moment. Smells. I purposely triggered myself to see what would come up. And
What were the smells?
perfumes, right? Ground beef. Struggle. Wet dog. I mean, there's kind of like, you know, Budweiser. Start itching.
Motorcycle.
Yeah, motorcycle oil. Oh, sorry, I didn't go that far, but yeah, and then playing a lot of songs. And I actually have a playlist on Spotify I made that goes through all the songs in the book as they are in the book in order, not to trigger you, but, you know, because songs are so powerful. Yeah, songs are so powerful. Yes.
Did you keep your diaries or journals? Did you access them at all when you were writing the book?
She's asking if I kept my journals or diaries. I did. I kept them. I moved a lot, so I kept what I could. This is why having a Duran here is so special. I really just kept my Duran Duran albums through 22 moves. I had them between pillows and bags, so I can tell you how you pack them so they don't break. But I did manage to keep a little box of journals and diaries as well. And I did go back to those and look at those and kind of look to see where I was in that time, to check dates a little bit. But I have a really good memory. I mean, people in the book who I've written about will say my memory's terrible because they don't agree with this, I'm sure. But I really do, unfortunately. I remember everything. But yeah, I do have the journals.
Worry about this being found
Did I worry about the journals being found?
as a kid?
I suppose I wanted them to be found.
I was going
to
to
tell
say
you the
people
truth.
weren't paying enough attention to
Yeah.
find your journals.
I
Yeah.
think for me, I wish I had been brave enough to write things down.
Yeah.
I think that if my mother had found them,
Yeah, I think it would have been interesting for her to find them. I suspect she probably did once in a while find them. But
probably
she
didn't-
was so checked out.
She didn't like what was in them.
Yeah, and she was
didn't
so
wanna-
checked out. But I think that I would have loved to have her attention ever. And so had she picked him up and said, "No, this didn't happen. Why are you writing this?" Guarantee that's happening now for her. Right?
that's what my mother said.
Yeah.
It never happened. I don't know what you're
Yeah. Yeah. And that's okay. For her, it didn't
It's like
happen.
the ultimate found your journal.
Yeah, ultimate journal, right? And I think too, if you're writing about people, you just got to let go of their reaction. She can write her own book. I'll buy it.
I won't. I'm mad at her.
Yeah.
Everyone's probably heard this at Anne Lamott, who says, if you don't want people to write bad things about you, then you need to behave better.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty great.
Yes. Yeah. Don't give you credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if- Yes, Tom.
Hello. I was just wondering, when we were all telling you our sad stories that weren't sad as yours, like how hard was it for you to? Because I never knew this until you left the book up. I was telling you some like middle class white problems. And you never ever like. How difficult was it for you to
Aw.
say life could be tougher, but you never just listened? Was it hard for you to hold back and say, I've been through this stuff too, or or would you say? Had I known, I would have been. Oh my God, holy shit. What am I complaining about?
We would have switched. Yeah.
Is it hard for you to not ever reveal what you are?
Yeah, I think though, like I was telling the parents of my 14-year-olds, I don't want my 14-year-olds to read it because I shouldn't have been exposed to it at 14 either, right? But I think too, again, like listening to you guys all tell me things about your lives, and you'd never want to, first of all, minimize what people are going through, especially your students. And I think what's probably for me as a teacher, because I know how dark it can get, it's a little bit easier for me to listen to my kids' problems because I can still see the optimism. I can still see the light for them, right? I can still see they're talking about it. I never talked to a teacher about it, ever. So if you're talking about it, that's such a huge step. It's super brave that we talked. It's super brave. And I honored that. And I would have been funny if we would have switched chairs. If I'm like, let me tell you about my life. Hop on over to this chair. Hop on over.
But everyone's hardest thing is their hardest thing. And I know when my mom died when I was 17, so many of my friends felt like they couldn't tell me about their like romance issues or their, you know, like they were mad at their mom. And that was really isolating for me because I was like, well, just because you're not grieving a parent doesn't mean that I don't want to know what's going on in your life and what's hurting you right now, because everybody's threshold is where they're at.
Right.
And so I think it's really actually important for us to not isolate people who are, you know, going through something harder or grieving something, because it's like they also need to know what you're going through, like that, because that's community, and that's how you, like, you know, help each other and heal each other, instead of just like, oh, you've been through so much, I can't even talk to you about my, you know, split ends.
And I think I have to have boundaries, and I'm kind of okay with my boundaries. I really like you guys, and I love hanging out with you when you're my students, but I do feel like I have pretty good boundaries with what not to kind of divulge and discuss, and not make it about me either, which I make most things about me, but except when Katie, Joe, and I are talking. Yeah. Yes. Oh, hi, Beth.
Hi. Bridey, as an author, when you look back at your work, is there any story you would have told differently if you could write it now?
There are stories. Such a good question. There are stories I would have written better, and I would have been more honest. Yeah, I think I still held back. My dad, who is not here anymore, but he got to read some chapters of it. He said to me when he read a few chapters, he said, just don't sugarcoat shit. And I still think I did. I still think there's a level of protection that I had.
But you could be protecting yourself even.
Yeah.
Not other people.
Yeah. But I definitely think I still, you know, I haven't had talked to my mom in 22 years, but I still think there's a little element of protection that we do, you know, there's a little element of protection. So
It's natural.
yeah.
So the next one will be Not So Bright Eyes.
There's
And
no
we'll
next
get all
one.
the dark, we'll get the darker side of all the.
It's gonna be a biography of Duran Duran, so we can just go hang out with them. It's gonna be something about them. Yes, Claire.
I know that sometimes kids who are in troubled situations might not be aware that the situation is troublesome. Was this ever the case for you, or how did you start to realize that, like, the problems that you were facing?
That's why you were in AP Lit. That's a very good question. Yeah, I didn't know. As I think a lot of people who are in it, you just don't know. You don't know how bad it is because you don't have that ballast. You don't have that understanding. You have been conditioned your whole life that this is fine. And if you don't think it's fine, you're told it's fine. Over and over and over and over, or you're told it's not that bad. It's not that bad. You're being dramatic. I was told that all the time. You're being dramatic. I think where I started to understand, going over to friends' houses, 4th, 5th grade, you start to see like people live differently than we do. You start to get embarrassed. You start to not want people to come over to your house. I became very aware when I was 12 of my mom's drinking problem, which before I didn't really understand what it was. The drug problem became apparent. So I think around my, seventh grade was really a year of seeing a lot of things. And I know from just teaching, we don't have a lot of abstract thought until you're about 13. And so I just didn't have that awareness at all. But when I started realizing how bad it was, I still minimized it because I had to live in it. I had to make sense of it. And it felt gross to really acknowledge how bad it was. So, I probably just tried to be somebody else though, too.
And I think throughout the book, you do a really good job of kind of we slowly see those scales fall from your eyes. Like, I mean, whereas like you kind of go with her as she's young and she's like, oh, this is just normal. Like, this is, I mean, children take care of their mothers when they're drunk. Like you can tell when she's young, she doesn't understand. And then you can tell as she's getting older that like, oh, and then she's trying to mitigate it and trying to, you know, get involved, and that isn't helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think you do a really good job of showing those stages
Thanks.
of awareness in the book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Edward.
Have anyone, like, I guess you, when you're going through school, that just really.
Oh, thank you. He's asking if I had me when I was going through school, if I had I actually just had a really great experience. I did not actually, that was my own doing though, because I changed schools about every 6 months. And so there was really no opportunity for teachers to get to know me very well. And I was very protective of my story and who I wanted to be to them. I was a straight A student and I had all my stuff and I did all my homework. And so, but I did a couple weeks ago, a month ago or so, I got to give the keynote at my school district for our whole staff of 600 whatever people. And I got to celebrate Mrs. Jones, who's in this book. Mrs. Jones was my 2nd grade teacher, and she told me I was smart and I was a good reader, and I never forgot, and I stole her book. And so I got to tell Mrs. Jones that she was in my book. She's 92. And I got to see her last Christmas, and then just did the keynote for the school district. And I talked about Mrs. Jones and how it matters to have a teacher, just even when you're 7, tell you that you're smart and you can read well. And then I got to have Mrs. Jones there. So the whole school district gave her a standing ovation. And at 92, yeah. And she doesn't remember me, but it's okay.
She probably doesn't remember her breakfast.
She tried to tell me at the car when she said, I remember you. I'm like, it's okay. It's totally fine. You're just in my book. No big deal. Yeah. But I think that I did get lucky, and I do have some other people in the book that I get to thank for helping me. I did become pretty good at paying attention when people liked me and said I was good at something. And I've always been really good at that. When people see something in me I don't see, I believe them. I'm not one of those people that I'm like, no. I mean, I can say that, but if people believe in me, I became a whitewater raft guide and I don't know how to swim really, because people said, oh, you should do this, you'd be good. And I was like, okay. You know, I became a teacher. I did not want to be a teacher. Zero desire to be a teacher, but somebody saw me teach once in a substitute situation and they were like, you have to teach. And I was like, okay. So I think in that sense, I allowed people to validate the things that I wasn't sure about, for sure. But I had my students are my teachers, right? You guys are my teachers, 100%. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? We're about done. Oh, Emily, my roommate from college.
Ah.
And then she's always been so enthusiastic and was super fun to live with. And I've heard some of the stories before, but I just wonder if you think the kids now in high school and junior high have better resources, or I mean, do you think you would have spoken out earlier if you lived now? Or is it
Yes. Yeah, I think kids are given so many great opportunities to talk now. I think we do social emotional learning activities. We ask kids how they're doing all the time. We have wellness centers in a lot of our schools now. We have parents like you who care and ask. So a lot of us parent the way we wish we were parented. And I think that's a really helpful thing. I'm definitely the mom I wish I had in a lot of ways. And but I think, you know, kids are a mess for sure. But
they always have been.
Right. But now they have opportunity to get help. There's so many people out there who want to help kids. And I think it's because they're us.
And they're aware of even the concept of mental health.
Right.
Which it wasn't even did you know about the term mental health when you were a kid?
Right.
I didn't even drink water.
Right.
Until I was like, okay. So like we were not taking care of ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Joe?
Yeah. One of my staff keeps telling me something his grandmother keeps telling him, and you're the epitome of what he's saying. And it's like, with everything you've gone through, and these are all your students. I mean, a lot of these people are your students. I had no idea you were older than any of them. And you've turned out really, from what I've seen in Tahoe, from what I'm hearing now, you've turned out to be a person. And what his grandmother told him is things don't happen to us, they happen for us.
Yeah.
And based on what he says, I said, okay, but you're the epitome of that. It seems from your childhood.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe
Yeah.
you were lucky to go through it because that
Yeah.
made you.
You talk about in the book, you talk about how forgiving can be, isn't this an Oprah thing that you
Yeah.
talk about in your book? Like forgiving somebody, you could be saying, thank you for giving me the experience that made me learn and change. Which I thought, I don't think I'd heard that before.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, it's like a very healing way to look at something hard.
Yeah, and I put in the beginning, there's a quote from The Wizard of Oz about, when Dorothy realizes that she could have gone home right away, but then the Scarecrow says, well, I wouldn't have my brains, and the Lion says, I wouldn't have my heart. Or the Tin Man, however that goes. And I was talking about this the other day, that there is a part of me that has always really, truly believed I would give up all this to be a more shallow person, to tell you the truth. There's a part of me that's like, bring on a Kardashian, just like whatever that is, that people are happy and they don't go through stuff. Because it's really, it's one thing to be like, oh, these experiences kind of have made me who I am. And yes, but man, they're hard. And to kind of just be flippant about it and say, but it made you such a good person. And you're so, yes, but dang, I think there's a lot of good people out there who didn't have to go through this stuff too. I know a lot of amazing humans that didn't have to go through really hard stuff. And so I just wonder why some of us are given that and why some of us are given the other. And I'm okay with it, but I don't wish it on anybody to say, like, you have to go through all this to be a spectacular human. I mean, he's one of the coolest people I know. And there's this sparkle and sunshine, right? But I do think that if we can go through things like this and you can take something from it and you can maybe help other people, that is the best thing. I've been getting a ton of messages from people who are reading it saying it's helping them. And all I can hope is that that continues on, because it will make it a lot more impactful and meaningful, right? Because writing memoirs is kind of self-indulgent. You're like, oh, I'm so amazing. Look at me. I went through this. But then you realize that this person in this book, I don't know if it's me anymore, really. Like, it's a little girl, but she's okay. She's okay. And this is just for other little girls.
Your book is not you anymore. Your book is your
Yeah.
book, and it
Yeah.
has medicine in it,
Yeah.
and it will heal people.
Yeah. And I do hope the second part of the book, the title says surviving our monsters and learning to live without them. And this is the one piece I wanted when I was reading all these great memoirs. They all just had these great endings where they forgave and they moved on. And it's probably out there already, but I just didn't find it. I was looking for how did you leave? How did you move on? How did you survive? How did you stay gone? How did you stay gone was the big one for me. And who did you decide to forgive and how? And that was very challenging. And so I wanted to write that book. I wanted to say, yes, the first part of this is I survived these monsters, but I wanted the second part to be like, how did I learn to live without them? Because as a kid, rescuing your mom, you're to that. I was Wonder Woman, literally in a costume. I was Wonder Woman. And I was an addict, and I needed to save her. And we both believed I could. And I had to break that addiction, and I had to break that cycle. And so I wanted to really show people how you could leave that situation for good. And so I hope that when people read this, to go back to that question, I hope that when people read this, they do see a little bit of a how-to manual. How do I do it? And how do I forgive or choose not to forgive? That's okay too. I have a chapter called Unforgiven. And I'm okay with that too. Yeah. Yay. Yay.
Yay, you.
Y'all, this is Zibby's bookshop. This is such a big deal for me. I'm really excited.
You came in here last year and you manifested it, right?
Yes. So, yeah, back in January, I was like, I'm going to get in this bookshop. And poor Zibby's bookshop, I've tagged them 1,000 times on Instagram, but
It clearly works.
Here
yeah.
we are. Well, thank you so much, both of
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all again for coming. Like I said, we have plenty of books up front. We'll keep you guys pushed up. And yeah, thank you.
Should I demic myself in case I say anything embarrassing?
Thank
Oh,
you. Thank you,
Fell down my
everyone.
shirt.